There is a bone flute in a museum in Germany. It was carved from the wing of a griffin vulture over 40,000 years ago, 5 finger holes carefully spaced. When researchers at the University of Tübingen reconstructed it in 2009, they blew into it and it played a pentatonic scale, the same scale behind almost every lullaby you've ever heard. Someone in a cave in the Swabian Alps sat down in the firelight and made an instrument, not a weapon, not a tool, a thing that makes sound when you are sad. And the question nobody stops to ask is this: why would a species fighting for survival against ice and predators and starvation waste time doing that? You think of sadness as a flaw, a glitch in the operating system, something to medicate, to manage, to push through. But your ancestors didn't see it that way. They treated sadness as a signal, one so important that they built entire rituals, entire technologies, entire civilizations around answering it. And the way they answered it is almost the exact opposite of what you've been told to do. To understand what they did, you need to understand what sadness actually is, not the modern version, the original version. In 2009, evolutionary psychologist Paul Andrews and psychiatrist J. Anderson Thompson published a paper in Psychological Review that reframed depression entirely. They called it the Analytical Rumination hypothesis. Their argument was simple and uncomfortable. Sadness is not a malfunction, it's a mode. When something goes wrong in your social world, a lost ally, a broken bond, a threat to your standing in the group, your brain doesn't break. It shifts. It pulls you away from distraction, kills your appetite, wrecks your sleep, and forces you into a single, relentless loop of analysis. You chew on the problem. You can't stop. That feeling you call depression, at its lowest, mildest level, is your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do: solving. Andrews pointed to a molecule called the 5-HT1A receptor. It binds to serotonin. When researchers compared the functional region of this receptor between rats and humans, the match was 99%. 99. Across millions of years of divergent evolution, natural selection kept this receptor almost untouched. That kind of conservation means the mechanism isn't a mistake. It was kept on purpose. The ability to enter sadness was so important that evolution refused to let it go. But here's where it gets strange. Your ancestors didn't just sit with the sadness. They didn't journal about it. They didn't isolate in their tents and wait for it to pass. They did something your modern world has almost entirely abandoned. They made it communal. They turned private pain into shared sound. In 1960, archaeologist Ralph Selecki was excavating Shanidar Cave in the Zagros Mountains of northern Iraq when he uncovered the remains of a Neanderthal skeleton, labeled Shanidar 4, surrounded by dense clusters of pollen. Not random pollen. Clusters from yarrow, cornflower, bachelor's button, grape hyacinth. Flowers. Someone, around 60,000 years ago, had laid flowers on a body. The implications staggered the field. These weren't Homo sapiens, they were Neanderthals, and they were grieving. They were performing ritual around death, arranging color around loss, placing beauty next to the thing that terrified them most. The theory has been debated. Some researchers argue burrowing bees carried the pollen in, but new excavations led by Cambridge archaeologist Emma Pomeroy have found more Neanderthal remains in the same cluster, in the same spot, suggesting this was a place groups returned to again and again across decades or centuries. A site for the dead. A place you bring your sadness. And that instinct to bring your sadness somewhere, to someone, runs deeper than any culture. The psychologist John Bowlby, working in London in the 1950s and 60s, built an entire framework around it: attachment theory. His insight was that grief isn't a disorder, it's a search behavior. When a child loses sight of its mother, it doesn't shut down. It screams, it scans, it moves toward where the bond was last intact. Grief, Bowlby argued, is the adult version of that same desperate scan, your nervous system looking for a connection that no longer exists. And the only thing that calms that system is the presence of another. Not advice, not answers, presence. Your ancestors understood this without ever reading a paper. Across almost every indigenous culture ever studied, sadness was met with a collective physical response: wailing, keening, rhythmic chanting. In parts of Ireland, into the 20th century, women called keeners would gather around a body and cry in unison, Structured, melodic, almost musical grief. In Aboriginal Australian communities, communal sorrow songs carried the weight of loss through the group like a current through water. And in ancient Mesopotamia, over 3,000 years ago, a poet put it in cuneiform. The Epic of Gilgamesh, often called the oldest story in the world, is, at its core, a grief narrative. When Gilgamesh's companion Enkidu dies, the king screams. He tears at his hair. He paces like a lioness who has lost her cubs. He refuses to let the body be buried until a maggot falls from its nose. Then he wanders. He declares, in a line preserved on clay tablets found along the dried channels of the Euphrates, "Sorrow has entered my belly." The Akkadian word he uses, nisatu, appears not only in poetry but in medical texts of the era. It was the same word prescribed against in herbal treatments. It was clinical. It was also poetic. It was both a diagnosis and a prayer. And the treatment was never isolation. In ancient Mesopotamian medical texts from the city of Ashur along the Tigris, tablets belonging to a healer named Kisur Ashur, the cure for sorrow involved ritual, community, incantation. The body was treated. The group was summoned. The grief was externalized through sound and ceremony. Heartbreak, in Akkadian, was lullaby, a sickness of the heart organ, and it was treated as a condition of disconnection, not a personal failing, a communal emergency. This is the part that should unsettle you. Because you live in a world that has done something no previous human society ever attempted, you've made sadness private. You close the door. You put in earbuds. You scroll. You text, "I'm fine," to the person who could help you most. And your nervous system, the same nervous system that was built for firelight and wailing and the physical presence of your group, has no idea what to do with that silence. Ad Vingerhoets, a psychologist at Tilburg University in the Netherlands, has spent decades studying why humans are the only species that produces emotional tears. Not reflex tears, not irritant tears, tears that fall because something hurts inside. His research suggests these tears evolved as a social signal, a visible, unmistakable broadcast to your group that you need them close. Tears blur your vision. They make you vulnerable. That's the point. They are a white flag waved at the people who are supposed to come running. But the signal only works if someone is there to see it. And maybe that's the crux of it. Your ancestors didn't have a word for depression as a clinical category. They didn't need one. When sadness arrived, they had a protocol. It involved fire. It involved the human voice. It involved bodies in proximity, breathing the same air, matching rhythms. Robin Dunbar, the evolutionary psychologist at Oxford, has argued that synchronized physical activity, singing, swaying, chanting, triggers endorphin release across a group simultaneously. It bonds them. It creates a chemical solidarity that no individual coping strategy can replicate. Your ancestors didn't fight sadness. They metabolized it. Together. Through the throat and the chest and the shared vibration of sound in a dark room. That bone flute from Holofel's cave wasn't entertainment. It was medicine. 40,000 years of medicine, carved from the wing of a bird that flies higher than almost any other species on Earth, the griffin vulture, a creature ancient cultures associated with the passage between life and death. Someone chose that bone, shaped it, tuned it, and played it in the dark for someone who was hurting. Tonight, when the wait comes, and it will, because you are human and the wait always comes, notice what you do with it. Notice whether you reach for a screen or a voice, whether you close a door or open one. 400 centuries ago, someone sat in a cave and played 5 notes into the silence for no reason other than that another person was in pain. The melody is gone. The instinct isn't. Your body still knows what to do with sorrow. You just stopped letting it.